And to discuss this further, I'm joined in the studio by Murat Aslan. He's a lecturer at Hasan Kalyoncu University, and by Ahmed Rushdi, who's flown in from Iraq and is a foreign policy advisor to the Speaker of the Iraqi Parliament. Thank you so much for being here. As you've made the longer journey, Ahmed, let me begin with you. Iran's influence, specifically in Iraq, how much of an influence is there, or has it been exaggerated?
Well, actually, Iran, from the beginning, from 2003, made some sort of an agreement with the Shiite components of Iraq as some sort of alliance inside Iraq. And at that time, it started to begin to progress its relation with the rest in a way or another, to have a good relation with the Kurds and also try to convince the Sunnis that they are not an enemy for them. But at the end, the problem happened in 2014. Or let's say before 2014, when Mr. Maliki actually marginalized the Sunni from its cabinet and also from the political life, which also showed that Iran is actually backing Mr. Maliki at that time. And we all know what's happened in 2014 when Daesh came and invaded the whole Sunni territory in a way or another. And people, as a reflect of the bad relationship between Maliki and the Sunnis, actually accepted in one way or another someone other than the Iraqi government. Now, what's happened in 2014 is that step down of Mr. Maliki, who took about 700,000 votes, with Mr. al-Badi, who took only 3,000 votes. It showed you that how much the Iranian influence actually failed to convince Iraq as Maliki is again become a prime minister, which also show you now is that how much the Iranian influence actually afraid what's going to happen in the next days.
In a zero-sum game, if we are to believe Ahmed Rushdi, if Iran's influence with the rise of Abadi is a sign that Iran's influence is waning to an extent. We'll talk about that as well. What about the US influence? Is it on the rise? Murat?
Actually, the main policy of the United States is to cut the Iranian influence, especially towards Israelis, which means they are afraid of, a build-up of Shiite crescent, especially at the south of Iraq and Syria, that can easily reach to Lebanon. And we can see from the employment of the PKK by the United States that they want to try to cut up that linkage, especially in Syria, because we know that Deir ez-Zor is just at the up north of this crescent, and they support PKK just to locate themselves in the midst of Shia groups.
You're talking about Shia groups. I quickly want to bring in Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, who's made this quite a public tour to the United States. And he said specifically, speaking about the Iranian Supreme Leader, Khamenei, he said that he wants to create his own project in the Middle East, very much like Hitler. Is that a fair comparison, Murat?
Well, the comparison is not that much better, because Hitler is different and Iran is different. Doesn't matter who the leader is.
I guess what I'm trying to get at is, why would MBS make such a statement quickly?
Yeah. What I believe is that most states in the Middle East, especially the one who are totalitarian, are afraid of Iranian influence upon the Shiite public in their communities. Because if you go through the Gulf Council, for instance, and as you know, it was built in 1981, just against the Iranian threat against themselves. They do not want any, interference of Iran in the community. Because if you go through the Iranian constitution, the articles 151st, 52nd, and 53rd, these articles indicate a regional policy that Iran will address the needs of the Muslims in the regions, especially the Shiites. But actually the practice is not such like that, because we see close linkage of Iran with the Kurds at the north of Iraq, and they are not Shiite.
Well, there was some talk of Turkey and Iran getting into an agreement to take care of that issue, especially around Kandil. We'll get to that in a bit, but we've got Saudi Arabia, we've talked about that. The incoming new national security advisor, in the US. John Bolton wrote an article some time ago titled, "To Stop Iran's Bomb, Bomb Iran." What do you make of that?
Well, it show you that Trump is actually collecting his allies inside the administration in a way to raise up a flag, which is maybe the war flag in a way or another against Iran, which also puts some sort of afraid in the Iranian government in a way or another.
But realistically, do you honestly think the Americans can bomb Iran in this day and age? At this anniversary of 15 years later when they bombed Iraq, and we've seen how that experiment turned out, what do you see?
But it's supposed to be you are expecting anything as the Iranian government, as any government. It's supposed to be expecting anything that happens, especially from personality like Trump, who is he's actually doing always the non-expected. So with the Pompeo, with Bolton, with MBS visit to US to try to make some sort of interest of what's happening inside the administration, to make some sort of Israeli talks about bombing Iran and so on, it looks like there is some clouds in the sky talking about something solid against Iran, which also going to reflect the Iraqi election, by the way.
It's a domino effect. Ominous tidings from Baghdad. But thank you so much, Ahmed Rushdi, for joining us here. And Murat, Aslan, always a pleasure.